Russia may have the advantage in manpower, equipment, and sheer scale, but in modern warfare, numbers alone are no longer enough. Across the battlefields of Ukraine, every meter of land has become painfully expensive to capture. Entire assaults sometimes stall for the smallest patch of ground, turning even minor advances into brutal and costly struggles. The reason is not just the terrain or the weather, or even the soldiers themselves. The real reason is a strategy that has transformed Ukraine into something incredibly difficult to conquer. Military analysts often describe it with an unusual name, the steel porcupine. At first, the name sounds strange, but the idea behind it is surprisingly simple. In nature, a porcupine is not particularly strong. It is not fast, and it cannot outrun most predators. Yet despite this, it survives in environments filled with danger. How? Because attacking it comes at a price. The porcupine's body is covered with thousands of sharp quills. Any predator that tries to bite or attack risks being injured, sometimes severely. A single mistake can leave the attacker wounded, blinded, or worse. Over time, predators learn something important. Attacking a porcupine is simply not worth the cost. And this exact principle inspired modern military planners. Instead of relying purely on massive armies and traditional offensives, a smaller force can create a defensive system so dangerous that attacking it becomes extremely costly. The goal is not necessarily to destroy the enemy outright, but to make every advance painful and expensive. This is the logic behind the so-called Porcupine Strategy. In this strategy, a country spreads its defensive power across many layers. Missiles, drones, artillery, mines, radar systems, electronic warfare, and fortified defensive lines all work together. Each layer becomes one more spike on the porcupine. And Ukraine has become one of the clearest real-world examples of this strategy in action. But to truly understand the steel porcupine, we need to go further back in history, because this strategy did not appear overnight. It evolved over decades of military thinking, hard lessons, and painful defeats. During the Second World War, the Soviet Union developed what they called defense in depth. Faced with Germany's devastating armored offensives, Soviet commanders realized that no single defensive line could stop a determined armored assault. The answer was not one strong wall, it was many walls, one behind the other, spread across enormous distances. The Battle of Kursk in 1943 became the ultimate test of this idea. Soviet intelligence revealed that Germany planned a massive armored offensive against the Kursk salient, a bulge in the front line that jutted into German-controlled territory. Rather than simply defending, Soviet commanders prepared something extraordinary. They built defensive positions stretching nearly 300 kilometers deep into their own territory. Thousands of kilometers of trenches were dug. Over 500,000 mines were laid across the anticipated attack routes. Anti-tank guns were positioned to create overlapping fields of fire. Artillery was massed in enormous concentrations, and behind all of these layers, large armored reserves waited, ready to strike the moment the German offensive had exhausted itself. When Germany launched its attack, the results were devastating for Germany. German tanks advanced into a landscape designed specifically to destroy them. Every meter forward cost lives and vehicles. Mines shredded tracks. Anti-tank guns picked off armor from carefully prepared positions. Artillery rained down from coordinated strike missions. And every time the Germans thought they were breaking through, another defensive layer appeared behind the first. The offensive ground to a halt. Germany never recovered the strategic initiative on the Eastern Front. Kursk proved something that military planners never forgot: a well-constructed layered defense built with intelligence and patience, could defeat even the most powerful offensive force in the world. Decades later, facing an enemy with overwhelming numerical superiority, Ukrainian military planners drew directly on this lesson. Instead of concentrating everything into a few large military formations, Ukraine has built a network of smaller, flexible defensive systems spread across the battlefield. Drones patrol the sky. Anti-tank missiles hide in forests and ruined buildings. Minefields block armored advances. Artillery waits behind defensive lines, ready to strike anything that moves too far forward. Together, these systems create an environment where every movement can be detected, targeted, and attacked. But let's look more closely at each of these layers, because understanding them individually helps explain why together they are so difficult to overcome. The first layer, and perhaps the most visible, is mines. Minefields are among the oldest defensive tools in modern warfare, but in this conflict, they have been used on a scale rarely seen since the Second World War. Millions of mines have been laid across Ukrainian territory, covering roads, fields, forests, and the approaches to towns and cities. For armored vehicles, mines represent a constant and invisible threat. A tank commander can see an enemy soldier. He can see a drone approaching, but a mine buried in the ground is invisible until the moment it detonates. And modern mines are not simple devices. Many are designed to resist clearing. Some use pressure plates, others use magnetic or acoustic sensors. Some are designed to damage tracks, immobilizing vehicles and leaving them exposed. Others are designed to penetrate the thinner armor on the underside of vehicles, killing the crew instantly. Clearing minefields under enemy fire is one of the most dangerous tasks in warfare. It is slow, methodical work, and every second spent clearing mines is a second spent exposed to enemy observation and fire. Minefields alone do not stop an army, but they slow it down. They force attackers to bunch together on cleared lanes, and they create predictable movement patterns that the next defensive layer can exploit. Which brings us to the second layer, anti-tank weapons. Modern anti-tank missiles have transformed the relationship between infantry and armor. In previous eras, tanks often dominated infantry on open ground. A small group of soldiers with rifles could do relatively little to stop an armored vehicle. Today, that balance has shifted dramatically. A single soldier or a small team armed with a modern anti-tank guided missile can destroy a main battle tank worth millions of dollars. These missiles can be fired from cover, from inside buildings, from tree-line positions, or from dug-in firing positions. Some are wire-guided, with an operator steering the missile to its target. Others use infrared or laser guidance. The most advanced versions are fire-and-forget weapons. The operator locks on to the target, fires, and can immediately take cover while the missile guides itself to impact. Across Ukraine, these weapons have accounted for the destruction of hundreds of armored vehicles. They have denied Russia the ability to use tanks freely in open terrain. They have forced armored operations into narrow corridors where vehicles are easier to channel, predict, and destroy. But anti-tank weapons represent only one part of the anti-armor layer. Another part, increasingly dominant, is something much smaller: drones. Small, fast, and relatively inexpensive, modern drones have completely transformed the battlefield, and their role in this conflict has been unlike anything seen in previous wars. Let's break down the different types because they serve very different purposes. The first type is reconnaissance drones. These are the eyes of the battlefield. Small, quiet, and capable of flying for hours at a time, reconnaissance drones provide a continuous live picture of what is happening on the front lines. Vehicle movements, troop concentrations, supply convoys, artillery positions, all of it becomes visible. This changes warfare in a fundamental way.
In past conflicts, armies could move under the cover of darkness, fog, or terrain. A convoy moving through a forest might be invisible to ground observers, but a drone flying overhead sees through all of that. There is simply nowhere to hide from a persistent aerial observer that can stay airborne for hours and stream live video to commanders kilometers away. The second type is artillery spotting drones. These work in close cooperation with artillery units. They fly over enemy positions, identify targets, and direct artillery fire with a precision that was previously impossible. They can watch the fall of each shell and provide real-time corrections to artillery crews. In earlier conflicts, effective artillery spotting required either aircraft, which were expensive and vulnerable, or forward observers, who had to physically position themselves close to enemy lines at great personal risk. Drones have made precision artillery spotting available at a fraction of the cost, all the way down to small unit level. The third type, and perhaps the most revolutionary, is the FPV drone. FPV stands for first-person view. These are small, fast, highly maneuverable drones controlled by an operator wearing a headset that shows a live camera feed from the drone itself. The operator effectively sees through the drone's eyes. Armed with explosives, FPV drones are used as guided munitions. An operator can fly one through a window, down a trench, or into the engine compartment of a tank. They can weave through obstacles at high speed, making them extremely difficult to shoot down. And because they are guided by a human operator in real time, they can adapt to moving targets in ways that conventional missiles cannot. FPV drones cost somewhere between $300 and $1,000 each, depending on the configuration. A main battle tank costs several $1 million. The asymmetry is staggering. Entire formations of FPV drones have been deployed simultaneously in what observers call drone swarms. Multiple drones attacking a single position from different directions, overwhelming a defender's ability to respond to all of them at once. And because drones are relatively cheap, they can be deployed in large numbers, sometimes dozens at a time. This constant threat forces armies to move more cautiously, slowing down operations and increasing the cost of every advance. But drones are only one part of the system. Artillery remains one of the most powerful forces on the battlefield. Long-range guns can fire shells across many kilometers, striking targets that soldiers on the ground might never even see. Modern artillery systems combine range, accuracy, and destructive power in ways that make them decisive weapons.
The interaction between drones and artillery creates a feedback loop that is extremely dangerous for any force caught in it. A reconnaissance drone spots a column of vehicles moving along a road. Within minutes, the position is relayed to an artillery battery. Shells begin to fall. If the vehicles try to scatter and take cover, the drone follows them. Adjustments are made. More shells fall. There is no safe place to stop and wait. There is no gap in observation to exploit. The drone simply keeps watching. Modern radar systems add yet another dimension to this complex battlefield environment. Counter-battery radars can detect the trajectory of an enemy artillery shell and calculate, within seconds, where it was fired from. This information is immediately passed to friendly artillery units, which can then fire a retaliatory strike on the enemy battery. This creates a deadly competition. Fire too often from the same position and you will be destroyed, but move too frequently and you lose the ability to maintain sustained fire support. The best artillery units in this conflict have become experts at what they call shoot and scoot, firing a rapid burst of shells and then immediately moving their equipment to a new position before counter-battery fire can reach them. Electronic warfare adds yet another layer to this already complex battlefield environment. Signals can be jammed.
Drone control links can be disrupted. GPS navigation systems can be interfered with. Communications between units can be degraded or intercepted. Modern military operations depend heavily on digital networks. Commanders need to communicate with their units. Artillery needs GPS data for precision targeting. Drones need radio links to their operators. Logistics systems rely on digital coordination. Electronic warfare attacks all of these systems simultaneously. An army that finds its GPS signals jammed suddenly loses precision targeting capability. Artillery that depended on GPS-guided munitions is forced to revert to older, less accurate methods. Drones lose connection with their operators and crash. Communication between units becomes fragmented. The battlefield becomes not just a physical struggle, but also a technological one. Signals intelligence, gathering information from enemy communications, provides another edge. By monitoring enemy radio traffic, analysts can identify the locations of command posts, understand enemy intentions, and predict attacks before they happen. All of these elements combine into a defensive system that is extremely difficult to break. Even if one layer fails, another one remains behind it. A tank might survive a minefield, only to be hit by a drone. A convoy might avoid drones, only to be targeted by artillery. A unit might escape artillery fire, only to be detected by surveillance systems moments later.
An advance that clears one defensive line finds another one already prepared behind it. This is the core principle of layered defense, and it is exactly what makes the steel porcupine so difficult to defeat. Like the quills of a porcupine, each defensive element makes attacking more dangerous. And crucially, the layers do not simply add together in a linear way. They multiply each other's effectiveness. And that is exactly the point of the Porcupine Strategy. The goal is not to eliminate every enemy unit. The goal is to make attacking so difficult that the cost becomes unbearable. Each destroyed vehicle, each failed assault, each stalled advance, all of it adds up. Eventually, attackers must ask themselves a simple question: is the gain worth the price? Like predators approaching a porcupine, attackers must weigh the danger of every strike. And sometimes the spikes are simply too many, too sharp, too costly to face.